So we're in the middle of our Take a Vow series, the Vow series, and I'm going to kind of orientate us to it because the Vow of Purity is today's vow, but you can't have the Vow of Purity without the other vows. It's the reason it's the last one. So vow number one, Pastor David brought us the Vow of Priority. The Vow of Priority. God will be my number one priority, and you, my spouse, will be my two. You will be my two. And Pastor Casey came and gave us the message of the Vow of Pursuit. I promise to always pursue my two. I always pursue my two. And if you think about it, like the world, there's a lot of things in this world that are going to try and break your marriage to pieces. And if you don't pursue your two, your marriage is going to die. That's what's going to happen. It will die. And so then last week, Pastor David brought us the Vow of Partnership. I promise to make my marriage about the we and not the me. Not about me. It's not about me. And he gave this great illustration of, if I give 100% and she gives 100%, well, we have 100% coverage versus the 50-50 barely meeting in the middle. I'm going to fight for us, not me. I'm going to fight for us. And today is the Vow of Purity. It's probably one of the most difficult vows to make, but it's also the most rewarding. It's one of the most rewarding. I promise to confide in you and not hide from you. Can you guys say that? Can you say, I promise to confide in you, not hide from you? Guys, look at your spouse or your fiance. I'm looking at you guys. And say, I promise to confide in you, not hide from you. Not hide from you. So I want to talk a whole lot later about what it means to confide, but first I want to talk about what it means to hide. What does it mean to hide? It means I want to take pieces of me. There are things inside of me that don't look so good, right? And I want to put them in the back corner in the dark room, and I don't want anybody to really ever see them. I want to put them in the dark. Well, here's the thing. Spiritually speaking, nothing grows in the dark. Nothing grows in the dark. In his letter to the Ephesians, Paul says, he says that we are children of light, and everywhere we go, we are supposed to bring that light. We're supposed to light up the darkness around us. He says in verse 11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. Guys, if you have stuff in the dark and you bring it into the light, what happens to it? It gets lit. It lights up. God has the ability to take all of the bad things that you have in your life, all of your sins, all of your moral failings, all of the mistakes that you made. He has the ability to put them in the light and bring light to them, to make them good, to make them about something great. Think about the story of Ned. Think about how powerful that is, because I can't read that story without thinking of while I yet sinned, Christ loved me. He died for me. While I was still a sinner, Christ died for us. In Ned's story, he says, while I was doing that, it didn't matter what condition I came home in, they still loved me. They gave themselves to me. If you're Ned and you have this example in the middle of the Graham ministry, how public is his failing? How bad is his mistake? It has the potential to take out everything that Billy and Ruth and all of them have sacrificed so much for. And yet they just chose to love him. Instead, he has this powerful image of what Christ did. In the middle of his sin, in the middle of his mistake, in the middle of all of his nasties. He brought it into the light, it gets lit. So we believe that if you bring it into the light, it gets lit. And here's the thing, I think we are made for it. We're made to be completely and open and honest with one another. If you go to Genesis chapter 2, verses 24 and 25, it's the very last two verses in chapter 2. And if you guys really know your Bible well, you know that chapter 3 is the fall. So that's when everything gets messed up. So right before everything gets messed up, Genesis 2, 24 and 25 says, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. They were naked. They had absolutely nothing between them and the other. There was nothing between them. Nothing between them. And they weren't ashamed about anything that was going on outside or inside, right? They fully knew one another, and they were fully known. So we were made for that. And because of that, I think that every person should confide in their mate. And the reason is because by confiding in your mate, there are some very amazing effects that happen on you as a person and on your marriage. Every person should confide in their mate because the effects confiding has on that person. All right, so effect number one is its effect on intimacy. Its effect on intimacy. Genesis chapter 3, verse 7 says, so right before this, they're naked and completely unashamed. Just 7 verses later. Then their eyes were both opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together, and they made themselves loincloths. Now, for some of us, we look inside of ourselves and we think to ourselves, I got this. I look pretty good. I'm okay. Let me ask you this question. In your marriage or in your relationships, any of your relationships, is there anyone that truly, truly knows you? That knows you, really knows you, knows all of your failings, knows you in the worst light, knows you in the best light, knows you in every single thing that you do wrong and everything you do right. Is there anyone in your life? Does your spouse know you that well? That's intimacy. Intimacy, into me see, as Pastor David always says. It's into me see. Intimacy. Do you have intimacy? And see, they were completely open. We're supposed to be completely open because the world is broke. Immediately afterwards, what? They sewed fig leaves. They hid themselves. And God knew that the situation was broke now. And what did he do? He made clothes for them out of animals. That's what ended up happening. So the world's broke. There are things that it's just the way it is. But between you and your spouse, between you and your significant other, between you and your closest friend, you can have an intimacy of relationship if you choose to confide in them. So you have to choose to bring out all the things about you that don't look so good in the light. So that's effect that's the first effect. It's effect on intimacy. And here's the thing. If you don't have somebody in your life that knows you and knows what you're going through and can see the things that you're dealing with and help you become the better version of yourself, it starts to affect your integrity. It starts to affect your integrity. So the second effect is its effect on integrity. Every time I think of integrity, I think of the hull of a ship, right? So the integrity of the hull of the ship. If the integrity of the hull of the ship is compromised, what happens to the ship? It sinks. Yeah, it takes on water. It sinks. So your integrity is your ability to stand up to things in your life. The pressures, the difficulties, the temptations, all of the things in life. Like I said before, the world is broke. There are too many people around us that entertain sin. There are too many people around. There's too many temptations out there. And if we're not aware of the faulty part of our integrity, we will give in. Our integrity is not completely solid. At one point in time, it was. Before chapter 3, it was. Now it's not. Billy Graham knew this. Did you guys know Billy Graham had a rule? It's the Billy Graham rule or the Michael Pence rule. It says, I won't, and it's a rule that we have in our staff at church. It says, I'm not going to eat alone with any member of the opposite sex, period, besides my wife. Only my wife. So we won't do it. Why? I love Casey. I love Jen. I love the people on our staff. Do I think that I'm going to do something wrong? No. It's just that I moved the line of right and wrong away from the sin. I moved the line of right and wrong away from the sin. I said, no, there's a chance right there where I could hit an iceberg, compromise the hull of my ship, and sink. And so I moved the line away from the sin. It's about putting boundaries up. And if you're questioning whether or not, if you really want to get a picture of integrity, you really have to ask the Creator, what does God say about what is right and what is wrong? And if you go to Mathew chapter 5, you get the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount has a lot of things to say about what is right and what is wrong. One of them, I'm going to just zone in on one of them, is Jesus said, you've heard it said that you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Just looking. It's not about doing. Like, you can think to yourself, as long as I don't do that, I won't make that mistake. But he's saying, all you have to do is look. All you have to do is entertain the thought. The minute you entertain the thought, what happens to your integrity? It becomes compromised. It becomes compromised. If you read, there's passages in there about anger. There's all kinds of sins and temptations out there that Jesus says, you guys think the bar is here. The bar is way up here. Your integrity is blown. You have to be confiding in the people around you, the people that you trust, the people that you know, so that you can set up rules. So you know where to move your line. You know where to put it. For me in my life, one of them is I don't like being home by myself. Like, I don't do alone well. I've never done alone well. Like, I entertain very depressing, terrible thoughts if I'm alone. So I try not to spend any time alone ever. Like, and if I do, then like I got to have something to do. Like, I have to have something to do. So that becomes a rule in my household. Like, don't stay home unless you have something to do. Period. Here's the thing about integrity now. And you take integrity and you keep messing it up after a while, and you start hearing about everybody else around you that's messed up. It starts to enter into your identity. And so the last effect that this has is its effect on your identity. I have a really personal story about this one I'm going to share. When I was about 13 or 14 years old, I decided I was going to save myself until marriage. I'm going to save myself until marriage. I'm going to do the right thing. That's what my parents say to do. That's what my brand new youth pastor says to do. That sounds right. That's what we're going to do. That didn't work. I failed miserably. And nothing really bad happened out of it. You know, my parents were like, oh, you shouldn't do that. But come to find out, my parents didn't. Come to find out, my grandparents didn't. In fact, I moved in with a girlfriend, moved into her house, like her and I got an apartment together, and my grandparents came in and said, that's great, you're smart. That's what you need to do. Because if you get into this, you see how my identity is starting to shift? I started thinking to myself, hey, I'm going to stay pure. I'm going to stay good. I'm going to save myself for the one that I marry. And now I'm all the way to, you need to test it before you buy it. You got to test drive before you buy. They're telling me, like, the people in my life are telling me my integrity, my identity has totally shifted all the way over here. I'm going in this direction now. And so then I started coming to Rivertown, and I'm fired up about Jesus, and I'm like, following him to the best of my ability, and I'm loving the band and Jen, and I volunteer for the worship band, and I start singing on the band. Well, then it comes out that I'm living with my wife, Michelle, and we weren't married yet, so we were still engaged. And Pastor David's like, hey, you want to go get lunch? And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go get lunch. And so I go get lunch with Pastor David. You guys, it was wonderful. It was actually wonderful. And so I go get lunch with him, and he says, how you doing? I was like, good. How are you and Michelle? Man, we're doing pretty good. Really, we were struggling, but, this is back to that hiding thing. We're doing okay. And he's like, I hear you're living with her. I'm like, yeah, we got an apartment over there on Leafmore. It's pretty nice. He's like, how's that doing for purity? And I went, people do that? People really do that? Like, yeah, people do that. You're supposed to do that. And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, well, tell me, how's it working for you guys getting married? Are you guys going to get married soon? You got a date? Because he's thinking to himself, I got this leader in my church that's leading on Sunday morning that's living in sin, right? He's thinking the right thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't even know that was a sin. My identity was all the way over here. I was totally confused. But while I was going over here, because here's the thing, only God can tell you what your identity is. I don't get to choose what my identity is. This whole time that I'm going in this direction, I was miserable. I'm trying to do what my grandparents told me to do. I'm living with Michelle thinking to myself, I don't know, this is kind of boring. I don't know if she's the one. In fact, I took the wedding, we were going to get married in the fall, and I said, how about let's push it back to the spring? That's not what you do. So it was rough. I was debating on whether or not she was the one for me and everything else, and then Pastor David came in and said, no, you need to move out of that house. And I'm like, oh, that's not the way the relationship started. I'm a little afraid that she'll leave. He said, well, if she leaves, she leaves. Like, you need to be a man and lead your family and do what's right. God's saying do this. Okay, all right, let's do it. So I went and got a dozen roses, and I came home, and I told her, I'm moving out, but here's some flowers. This is going to replace this intimacy that we had in this marriage, right? And she was mad. She was mad. So then I brought flowers the next day. And then I brought flowers the next day. And by the fourth day, she knew it was right. And I knew it was right. And all of a sudden, where I was going this way, I was going this way. I knew exactly who she was. I knew who I was. And I knew what our marriage was supposed to be. It only took like 4 days. 4 days of doing the right thing. And I readjusted, and my identity became what it was supposed to be. I haven't, my past, I got no reason to have the relationship I have with my wife. I do not. My past is full of all kinds of wandering all over the place. But yet, in the middle of that obedience, in the identity that I found one of the wonderful things about being completely lost in your identity is you're just open and honest with everybody about how lost you are. And so I'm confiding in David, right? And he was able to come in love and say, hey, this is how you're supposed to be. If you're really following Christ, this is where you're supposed to be going. And he fixed me. Like his boldness, Christ's love, and the Holy Spirit's work inside of me healed me. I don't even know how to explain it. In 3 days, it doesn't make sense that I can now have a concrete image in my mind of who I'm supposed to be with. And it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. So it affects your identity by confiding in the people that you love, by getting to that intimate place, that confidential, sacred place inside of your marriage. It's going to build who you are. It's going to build your identity in him. So by confiding, if you confide, by choosing, making an intentional decision, I'm going to confide in you. We got to keep all the other vows. Christ first. Christ first. I'm going to pursue you. It's about us and not me. And then in that, you can confide into your spouse. It's going to make you so intimate. You're going to grow years and years and years and years of growing in love with one another and knowing one another. I love the idea of my wife knowing me, all of me, and loving me. Like I get so much strength as a man out of that, out of knowing that she knows me, completely knows me, and loves me. And then it affects my integrity because now between her and I, we can talk about the things that I'm weak in. I can bring those things into the light. I can look at them. We can look at them. We can say, hey, we need to put this here so that you don't fall into that trap. We can have lives like Billy Graham's ministry, as awesome as it was, he put all kinds of boundaries in his life to keep himself from going into situations. It's not that Billy Graham was perfect. It's Billy Graham knew he knew where to set the line. He knew where to put the line to keep himself away from the sin. And then the effect on your identity, guys. If you can get to the point where you are open with who you are with somebody, and they have the chance to speak in and look at you and say, oh, do you see what you're doing here? Sometimes we do things that just seem natural to us, that other people look at and go, do you see what God's doing here? Like, do you see this? Do you see how great this is? Like, one of the things that I think it is amazing about my wife is she's so amazingly open and loving. Like her mercy gifting is way up here. So people go to her. Like she's a shelter for people. And it's amazing. For her, it's just normal. It's just, hey, I get a chance to reach into people's lives and love on them. For me, it's like, do you see what you just did? Like, that's amazing. We can be confiding in one another. We can help realize who we can see. It's broke, right? It's broke. But if I can look in, and she can look in, and we're both looking up, and we can start to see who we really are and who we were meant to be. We can start fixing what's broken. We can start getting back to that state we were supposed to be in Genesis 2, where we were completely open and completely honest with one another. And so application, guys. What I'm not saying is go home and unload on your spouse. It's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying go home and, for some of us, we have to stop and think, like, what am I trying to hide? Is there anything I'm trying to hide? But for others of us, we can go home and just unload on them. And it's not going to be helpful. It might even hurt your marriage. But there are some things that you can do to develop a culture, develop a place inside of your marriage where you can confide, a place full of trust and love. For one, you have to be real. Because you have to be real. Like, we are all fallen. We all make mistakes. But we are all deeply, deeply loved by God. Every single one of us is adored by him. He loves us in the midst of our mess, and he loves who he created us to be. Both of those things are very far apart, but he loves those things about us. And so you have to rest in that when you speak in your marriage. You have to be real. Like, this is me. I know there's some things that are messed up, but I'm just being real. You have to be open. You have to be open, which means if your spouse asks you a direct question about something, you need to answer it honestly. You need to stop and think, maybe take a day, but answer it honestly. Because sometimes when we get direct questions about what we're trying to hide, we want to just push it further back, or we want to make up stories, right? And we want to say lies. I'm saying be honest. I'm saying take it. He wouldn't have asked if he couldn't handle it. You have to trust that God's in the midst of your decision to confide in one another. And when they ask questions like that, be honest. Be honest. Also with that, you have to ask those questions. Casey said to pursue your two, right? Pursue your two, which means you have to look, and if you see sin in their life, you have to gently, lovingly ask questions about it. Is this what I think it is, babe? Right? Is this what I think it is? Like, help me understand this piece right here. And be loving. Be loving. You have to stop and think about what it is you're about to say. Yes, reveal. Talk to them. You need to tell every little bit of everything that you hide from your spouse. You need to tell them. But you got to think to yourself, how is this going to affect this person? I love this person. I love this person. How can I say this? How are they going to interpret this? Is this going to make them feel inadequate? Is it going to make them feel unloved? Is it going to make them, like, there's a whole list of things that the information you've got in the trunk that you're hiding. There's a whole lot of ways that it can be interpreted. You have to do your best to love that person and try and see it from their point of view. And address it when it comes up. You're like, hey, I got this thing that I'm doing, and I know, like, you might think that it means this, but it's not. I'm trying to be open and honest with you about it. I'm trying to love on you about this. Like, help me with this situation. Love. Be loving. Be loving. So be real. Be open. Be loving. You do these things, I'm telling you guys will have a marriage that everyone around you will be envious of. You will have a core place to base your whole life on, your whole person.